Well, hello there, everybody. Hello, Alfie, Katrina, Lawrence, Maria. Who else is with me? I think that's it for now. Anyways, I am very excited to be here today. And I've got, this is a great session on, closing, overcoming objections. None of us can sell a house unless we deal with their objections. So don't hesitate to ask questions at the end of our session. I'm going to start right away and usually do with questions at the end. So let's begin. I always like to start off with the definition of closing. And I have always said that closing is the process of helping people make decisions that are good for them. If you just take a second and sort of mull with that, helping people make decisions that are good for them. So you notice I'm not trying to twist their arm. I'm not trying to pull the wool over their eyes. I'm not trying to do anything like that. I want to help them make a decision that's going to help them in life, and I've always been a big believer that everybody needs to own a home in their life. It's the only hedge you have against inflation. And so I am always honored when I'm able to sell somebody a house, and that I was able to sell somebody a house in the past, because I know I've done the right thing for them. Keeping in mind that closing begins when you first meet the customer, so you're always closing. The minute you meet them, you're closing them to, if it's a potential buyer, to try and get them to have confidence in you and trust you. And, if it's a seller, the same thing. So, closing is a constant thing. You're always doing that. You are always focusing with the end in mind. In other words, know that your goal is to get that listing. Know your goal is to get them to buy a house from you. You got to keep that focused in your mind, because, so long as you are constantly, focused on your mission and what you're trying to accomplish, you're going to work hard at trying to make sure that you do all the things right. So as you are communicating, it is always important and best to speak with a positive result in mind. I remember, I'd sold my real estate business. I was a real estate broker and I had 2 offices, and I'd sold my business, and I thought, this is going back quite a ways. And I thought, oh, you know what? I think maybe I'll go back into real estate sales. And so this is the very first day, okay, of me being back in real estate sales. And there was a for sale by owner. And I jotted their phone number down. I called them, and it was just down the street from where the office was that I was working in. And I was able to get an appointment. And I remember walking through this house. I got the listing. So my very first day back, I got the listing. But the reason I got the listing was, as he's taking me through this house, I was like, and it'd been on the market for a while, I was told. I didn't know that, because, like I say, this was my first day. As I was walking through this house, I kept saying, God, this is a great house. I just know I can sell this house, and we go to another room and say, oh my God, I know I can sell this house, and I just kept saying that all the way through, and of course I was able to come back with an evaluation, and I did get that listing. I didn't get it that day, but I got it a couple of days later, when I went in with an evaluation. So always remember, speak with a positive results in mind. Also, here are some rules to overcoming objections, whether it's a buyer or a seller. Let's look at some rules. When you're dealing with a buyer and the offer, you've shown them houses, they're all excited, they want to put an offer on this house, and they now ask you, what do you think we should offer, or what do you think we could buy it for? Never be the first to suggest the price when you're dealing with a buyer. The same is true when you're dealing with a seller and you're on the listing appointment. The price is always last. I just did a listing presentation in an office here in Mississauga, where I am, and that was, one of the things we talked about, that when you're doing that presentation, that listing presentation, the price is the last thing you say. But just going back to the buyer for a moment, so when they ask you that question, what do you think they'll accept? Or how much do you think we should offer? You know, I always answered that question sort of this way. You know, I used to always say to them, you know, Mr. Seller, I have seen some sellers who've come down a little. You know, I've seen some sellers who've never budged a nickel. So it's really difficult for anybody to answer that question. We won't know what this seller will accept until we sit across the table and negotiate with them. So my question to you is, how badly do you want this house? You know, it's you and your decision, not my decision. It is your decision. So I always wanted the first price to come out of the buyer's mouth. The first price to come out would be to come out of the buyer's mouth. Because remember this, once you say, so if hypothetically they ask you the question, you say, well, you know, they're asking $540,000, you know, we could probably try 525, and you come up with a number, whatever the number is, and you come up with a number. Here's what I want to make sure you understand. They could have been thinking 535, they could have been thinking 530, they could have been thinking 539, you know, they could have been thinking 540. You don't know what they're thinking, but the minute you come up with a price, that becomes their ceiling. In other words, you said, well, I think we could try 525. Okay. That automatically now becomes the top that they're willing to pay. Even though you said we could try. They didn't hear the word try. They heard 525. So that's why it's so important to remember. Never should that price ever come out of your mouth. The first price has to come out of their mouth. And so they come and say, well, you know, I'd kind of like to try 525. Okay, and they now say that price. I want you to be careful now. Whenever you hear an objection, I want you to remember to do a couple of things. So when you hear that objection, I want you to pause. And I don't want you to answer the question right away. I don't want you to deal with it right away. I want you to pause. I want you to shake your head in a yes direction. Again, always shake yes. And then look at them after you've paused a few seconds. The longer you pause, the better it is, by the way. Look at them in the eye and say, I think we need to try higher. And don't quote a price. Just look them in the eye and say, you know, I think we need to try higher. And they say, well, how much do you think? And say, well, here's what I'm concerned about. I'm concerned that the first price that we go in with is either going to make the seller excited about negotiating with you, or it's going to make them upset. We don't want to upset the seller. We want to make them willing to negotiate with you. So I think we need to try a little higher. So if I asked you to go a little higher, what would that price be? You see, again, I'm not coming up with the price. So now they look and they maybe come up with, you know, well, what about 530? Okay, so now, you know, you bump them up a little. So now if it's, you know, if that price is not too far away from each other, you might concede and say, we could start there. And so always make sure that the first price that comes out of the mouth always comes out of the mouth of the buyer. And again, the same thing is true for a seller. You know, when you're sitting across the table from a seller and you're conducting a listing appointment, one of the most important things is to remember that they don't know you, they don't like you, they don't have any confidence in you. When you first go to this listing appointment, assuming that they're not friends or past clients for a moment, you're meeting them for the first time. What you want to do in this situation is understand, my first job is to build a little bit of rapport, gain some trust with these people, gain some confidence with these people. And so what I want to do in the beginning, before I reveal price, I want to talk about the market. I want to talk to them about what's happening in the real estate market right now in their area without telling them about what homes are selling for. I'm not revealing price. I'm just giving them an overall view. It's a buyer's market. It's a seller's market. It's a stables market. You know, what homes, average days on market, how many homes are listed now compared to 6 months ago, compared to a year ago. So I'm talking about market activity. I'm talking about how many homes are on the market in the area. I'm talking about this sort of thing. What I'm doing is building their confidence in me. I'm demonstrating my knowledge. So what I'm going to do is build rapport. I'm going to demonstrate, try to instill confidence in them. I'm proving the knowledge that I have. I'm going to now, talk about my marketing strategy, the way in which I think a property needs to be sold, taking into consideration today's market. And then I'm going to take a look at their house. I don't even look at the house right away. When I first come in, they want to show me the house right away when I'm going on a listing appointment. And, for the first time, and they're saying, we're thinking of selling our house. And I've made the appointment to go in and look at the house. The first appointment is typically let me come in and look. Then I'm going to go back to the office, do my research, and then I'm going to come back with a CMA kind of thing. Okay. So if this is the second time and I'm coming back now with the CMA, I've already seen the house. So now I can sit down with them and I'm going to talk first before we talk about me. I'm going to talk about this is the way I'm going to market it. This is how I'm going to market it online. This is the way I'm going to advertise it. This is, the different strategies that I'm going to use. And then I'm going to talk price last. And I always give them a 2-price strategy. And I do that before I show them the price. So when I'm talking about, my marketing strategy, I will say something to them like, Mr. Seller, just want to give you a little bit of an idea of what happens behind the scenes in the real estate world. There's 2 types of listings, and I'm role playing with you. This is exactly sort of what I say. I say, Mr. Seller, there's 2 types of listings that real estate agents get really excited about. The first type of listings are, and this is exactly how I say it, well-priced new product. Well-priced new product. They get very excited about that. They're looking at listings every day on MLS. And the second type of listing they like. And there's a bit of a race on which one they like more. They also like properties that have been on the market for a long time, that have been reduced and reduced and reduced and reduced. They also like those listings because when they see a property that's been on the market for a long time and it's had several price reductions, the first thing in their mind is the seller is going to, is willing right now. He's probably a little desperate. And now's a good time to come in with a lower offer because it's been on the market this long. So you see, those are the 2 strategies are what we call the retail approach to price. This is where we price high and we could always come down, which is what most sellers think. Let's go here. We can always come down. I want to make sure before I reveal price that I understand this strategy, but this strategy has risks with it. The longer a home has been on the market, the more price reductions. You see, every time a home is reduced and reduced and reduced, it's basically saying to the buyers, it's saying to the real estate agents working with buyers, we're more desperate. Oh, another price reduction. We're more desperate. You see, every time it comes out reduced, they think you're more desperate and more desperate and more desperate. And now what you're hoping to avoid is a low ball offer. In fact, that's what's going to happen. Is you're going to get a low offer because that's what they think you're desperate. And that's why, this little camera of mine keeps falling. So anyways, that's what we call the retail approach to pricing. The second strategy I used to say to them was the real estate approach to pricing. And that's where we look at what is happening in the market right now. What are homes selling for? What are buyers willing to pay right now in this market for this type of home? That's what we call the CMA. That's what we call the market value. And this is where we price the house as close to market value as we can. And we hope to get multiple offers, maybe even get into a bidding war. So remember, that's what I talk about with the 2-price strategy. I give them the option. I can do this way. I can do that way. My preference is to do the real estate approach to pricing because that is going to get your home sold quickly. It's going to get you possibly multiple offers, and it might even get you more than asking. You'll never do that if you price it high and come down and come down and come down, come down. That's going to be the opposite of that. But I don't reveal that price until after I've shown them how I'm going to market it, after I've talked to them about what's happening in the marketplace right now in terms of the types of buyer, after I show them all the strategies online and so on. And the last thing I talk about after everything is now I talk with the comparables. I'm showing the comparables and I'm dealing with price. So it's always the last thing. Always remember now, point number 3, when it comes to overcoming objections, that you never let the offer die. Now, or, in the case of working with a buyer now in an offer, you never let the offer die. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean, listen, I don't know if you've ever had this happen to you. It's happened to me a couple of times. Where a buyer gives you an offer, doesn't matter the price. You go in with the offer, you're the buyer's agent, you present to the seller with the other agent there. You present the offer, the seller signs it back, and you now have a higher price, doesn't matter the price. You now come to your buyer with this new offer from the seller, and you do everything you can to try and get them to agree, but they don't. And they say, well, that's the best we can do, and maybe we should look at more houses. Rather than let this offer die, I have actually gone back a second time with the exact same offers I had the first time and made a deal. Now, I say to real estate agents, this has happened a few times to me, a couple of times that I can think of, and I think it may have even happened more, but 2 that I can immediately think of in my mind right now. And I say to real estate agents, even if I have to go back with $100, I'll go back with $100. As a matter of fact, if I am sitting across the table with the listing agent, together with them, presenting this offer to the seller, the last words out of my mouth before I walk out the door with the counter offer is I look at the seller and I say, I promise you, Mr. Seller, no matter what happens, I'm going to do my absolute best. I'm going to keep this offer alive. And, I'm going to do my absolute best. I'm not going to lose this buyer because I know they're the right buyers. Thank you very much. And I'm going to go and work hard for you. And I leave. So my point here is never let the offer die, because once you let that offer die, most of the time it's gone. You can't resurrect it most of the time. And always remember, if you've lost one house for a buyer, the first one is always the one they want the most. And after you now take them out and show them other houses and try to get a second offer out of them, they're always going back to the first house that they didn't get and comparing it. Oh, the other house, I wish we had, kind of thing. If it isn't already sold, maybe then you can try again. But my point is, they start to lose confidence in you once you've lost them that first house. So be careful, fight as hard as you can with that first offer. Don't let the offer die. Go back with $100 if you have to, because it's amazing what one day can do in someone's life. We all know that. Also remember, closing is learning to ask questions. It's not about, I was with these people till 2:00 in the morning. I know if you sign it back, I'll lose them. This is the best they're going to do. Remember, every time you make a statement, like, I know I can't get a higher price, this is the best I'm going to be able to get, statement. Every time you make a statement, you open the floor up for a debate. It's no longer a negotiation. It's no longer working with their objections and trying to overcome their objections through negotiation. It's a debate. It's their opinion versus the customer's opinion and your opinion. So be careful with that. Always look at, I understand your feeling. That's a good point you brought up. Interesting point of view. However, suppose that, what if, is there a possibility? Have you considered? Would you think? Okay. And always turn your point into a question whenever you can. And I was in, I have to reveal this to you, it was probably one of the best closing scenarios I ever witnessed. This was when I was in the US. I spent 10 years working in the US market for HomeLife, as a matter of fact. And this was in Texas. And I was selling franchises back then. Anyways, long story short, she knew that I was coming, had an appointment set up with this lady, the broker of record. She knew I was coming at about 1:00. And there I was, right on time, and I look in this big office. It was a bullpen style office, no private offices, but right at the back was a closing room. And there was a young couple there, and I never met this lady, so I assumed that she was the person I was supposed to meet. She saw me, and she waves like this, come on, come in. And I said, oh, no, I'll wait here, it's okay. And no, come on, she goes like this. So, okay, I go back there. And and she introduces me. She says, "This lady's all the way from Canada." And, she's got this big hat on, she's your typical Texan big hair. And she's an older woman, quite older, actually. Her name was Helen, by the way. And so anyways, she says, "This is a young couple. They're buying their first house. They're have a seat." She's a real estate agent, but from Canada. And I thought, oh, how exciting. I was very happy to be sitting there watching her with this customer. And it was their first house. And she looked at them and she said, now watch the way she was questioning. Okay. She was saying, "So Mary Jo," I can't remember their names. "So Mary Jo," she had a sign back, and I don't remember what it was, 5,000, 7,000. It was a small amount. It wasn't a big amount, small house. And she said, "So Mary and Joe, it's your first house. How long do you think you're going to live here?" And the client says, "I don't know." And she said, "Humor me. It's your first house. You're not going to be here forever. How long do you think you'll probably live here?" And they said, 5 years. And she said, "That's interesting. It's about average. Most people, 5 to 7 years, especially their first house." And she says, she said, then she took her finger and she put it over top of the price on the offer, the counter offer, the extra 5,000. She put her finger over the price and she said, "Then why are you worried about $215,000? You're never going to be here long enough to pay $215,000. And she took out her calculator. She pulls out her little calculator and she does, the monthly payments times 60 months. And she said, pulls up the calculator and she says, "You're going to pay," whatever the number was, $34,128.19. "Do you like it enough to pay that?" And they looked at each other, husband and wife looked at each other, and they said, "Yeah." And she said, "Then what are you worried about? Sign here." And I'm like, whoa, what just happened? That was so cool. That was so cool. So that's what we mean when we say, closing is learning to ask questions. And that was a perfect example. So also remember another rule is time is a killer. Remember, the sooner you can get an offer out of these people every day, strike while the iron is hot. You do not want them thinking about it. I used to say that to my sellers as well. When I was a listing agent, I always used to get there a half an hour earlier before the presentation for 8 o'clock. I was there between 7:15 and 7:30, sometimes as early as 7:15. And I would, spend time now preparing my seller, letting them know, "I've not seen this offer. We're going to look at it together. When the offer comes in, what I want you to, when I pull the offer out and I hand you a copy, what I'd like you to do is read through it. I know your eye's going to go to the price, but I want you to read through the whole thing. I'm going to do the same. And then I'm going to explain the offer to you." And I always used to explain from the bottom up. And I used to say to the seller, "Now remember, you have 2 options tonight, only 2. We accept it because it's everything we want, or we make changes to it. And but we're going to do those changes tonight. We're not going to think about it because time is not on our side. We want to give that. If we're going to change it, we want the buyer to know what we want right away. We want them to not have any time to think about it either. So it's very important that they understand that. So I used to tell sellers that on the listing when I had a listing and the offer presentation, I got there early, as I mentioned. So time kills. It doesn't help you, it hurts you. Leave your emotions at home is another very important rule. When it comes to overcoming objections, okay? Because one thing is for sure, when you hear objections, remember, doesn't matter how many objections there are, everybody has worries, fears, concerns, doubts rolling around in their mind. They are not going to sign anything until every one of those worries that are up there in their brain are dealt with. So that's why questioning is so important, because we're probing, we're getting their worries out, their fears out, their concerns out. And so that's why we say we're problem solvers. They're worried about this. Here's the solution. They're worried about that. Here's another way of looking at it. So that's basically what I mean by that. Leave your emotions at home. Doesn't matter how angry they are. Doesn't matter how frustrated they are. You are cool, calm, collected, always in control of your emotions, always in control of the presentation. Don't let anybody disrupt the control. Your job is, if they're overexcited, change the subject and talk about something else. Talk about golf. Talk about spring coming, whatever. Change the subject and then come back again, because you can't negotiate with anybody when they're upset. So leave your emotions at home. We just mentioned strike while the iron is hot. So you know what I mean by that. Buyers and sellers have to like each other. In other words, what you don't want is to have a buyer fighting with a seller, because that's going to make them hard to deal with and not want to cooperate. Mr. Seller, I was with my people. I showed for quite a while yesterday or this morning, whatever. I want you to know I showed them a lot of houses. They really, really love your home. They appreciate all the work you've done. They've got 2 kids. I explain who they are. But you want the buyer and seller to like each other. Because if you like somebody, you are far more willing to cooperate and be more reasonable than if you don't like somebody. If you don't like somebody, it's like, okay, you think you're tough, I'll show you tough. That's what you don't want, okay? Because that's only going to come back to bite you in the butt. Also remember another very, very, very important rule: the fewer the changes, the better. In my negotiating class, I call it the 4 yeses when you put an offer together. A yes to the closing date, a yes to the extras, a yes to the terms, and a yes to the price. Those are basically your 4 yeses. Now, I always, when I'm preparing the offer with my buyer, I already want to try and get as many of those yeses already agreed upon with the seller. If the seller has, April 30th closing date, there's a reason they have April 30th as a closing date. If I can accommodate that, I'm going to use April 30th, because now I'm giving them their closing date. They're not willing to leave the washer and dryer. So I'm not going to ask for it now. I'm going to only include the things that are on the listing contract. I'm not going to add anything else in there. And I'm going to try, if the buyer wants it, I'm going to try and dissuade them from it. And so now I've got an agreement on price on the closing date. I've got an agreement on the extras. And now, you need a condition on financing or whatever. So there might be a condition in there, but it's basically all cash. And now what you've got is you've got price where there's going to be an objection possibly, and maybe the fact that there's a small condition in there, which is reasonable. Everybody's going to have a condition on financing today, kind of thing. So the fewer the changes, the better. It gives you a much better chance. And I used to tell the sellers that as well when I'm sitting there before the offer comes in. Mr. Seller, what we're going to look at, we're going to look at the most important parts of the offer, but what we really want to do, I used to have my notepad out, and, I would say, once the offer was there, I would say, now let's prioritize, because they didn't like the price, they didn't like the extras, and they didn't like the closing date. So those are the priorities. And now you see number 10, a concession for a concession. But before we get to the concession for a concession, Mr. Seller, let's prioritize, out of these 3 things, let's put them in order. What is the single most important thing? You all know what it's going to be. So price is number 1, and closing is number 2, and the washer and dryer is number 3. Okay. So my point here is now, what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to say now, in order for us to be able to get you that price, are you willing to concede on the closing date, the washer and dryer? Okay, so I'm trying to, if I give you this, would you give me that? Okay, that's sort of what I'm trying to do here. So these are the 10 rules, if you will, on overcoming objections. The other thing I say, we talked about it today, is the trial close, testing the client. When you're showing houses to a buyer, or when you're sitting across the table on a listing appointment, question to the seller. If I'm able tonight to prove to you that I am the best agent that can get you the best price for your home, are you willing to allow me to sell it for you tonight? I'm looking them straight in the eye. I'm going to ask that early because I'm trying to get a feeler. Now, they might say, well, we really want to think about it. I'm not quite sure we're ready yet. We haven't talked enough about it. We're getting another opinion. No matter what it is, fine. You've just started. Like, this is one of the first questions I ask right when I'm there in the beginning, okay? I'm just testing them, okay? And I'm not saying that I'm going to accept any of the things that they're going to get another agent and all of that. I'm obviously going to deal with it. But I ask that question early, and no matter what their answer is, I understand. And another question that you're going to ask the buyer, once we find that perfect house for you, are you ready and able to put an offer on the home right now? You need to know because it's very, very important that you're dealing, and you deal with that early, with the client when you take them out. You want to get all the objections out of the way. Well, our grandmother needs to see it, or whatever the case may be. Is we have to get some money still. You need to know where their situation is. Are they ready, willing, and able? Those are the points that you're trying to make here. Also, through trial closing, as you're on that listing presentation, I always like to have a key and a lockbox. Do you have any reason why you wouldn't be willing to give me a key and put a lockbox on this property, Mr. Seller? Again, your trial close. Oh yeah, no problem. We'll give you a key. You see, when he says that, he's sort of committed to list with you. Okay. Is the washer and dryer included in the sale? Do you want the washer and dryer included in the sale? Is the way I would answer that, okay? Even though I'm trying not to get appliances into it, but that's basically how I answer the questions. Remember, your job is to educate and prepare the clients. Spend the time educating your seller and your buyer about the process of buying and selling. The more educated they are about buying, the more educated they are about selling, they're going to stick with you, and the more you're going to have control over the whole process of buying and selling. Don't let all of these things be a surprise to them that come up, okay? Now, the other thing I want to mention here is there's certain things that you should never talk about with your sellers or your buyers. For example, if you've got a real estate agent on the other side, let's say you're a buyer's agent, you've got a real estate agent on the other side that's not cooperative, that's an idiot, no matter what you want to call them, they're unprofessional, they don't know what they're doing. The last thing you want to do is let the buyer know that that's what the other agent is like. Don't involve them in information that they don't need to know. Because the more worries, because that's now giving them something to worry about. Your job is to make buying and selling easy, fun, enjoyable. It's not to put pressure on them. It's not to make them have something else to be concerned about. So you want to prepare them, but there's certain things that you don't have to talk to them about. Only involve them when it's an absolute necessity. If you've got a lawyer who's a jerk, if you've got a mortgage guy who's a jerk, all the problems that come up, don't let them know about that. Deal with it on your own. If you need their help, of course, you're going to ask the information, and you're not going to tell them about the problem. You're just going to ask for the information you need. So spend time educating your buyer and seller. The more educated they are, the more control you have over the presentation and the offer and the signature. If they trust you, they will put their faith in you, and they will say, it's like when I go to my hairdresser and she says, well, what do you want to do today? I say, you're the boss. You're the expert. Whatever you think I need, you do. I don't need to. I trust her. I have confidence in her. Now, I know it's only a haircut, but still, you get the point. It will take us, it will make such a big difference when it's time for them to sign if you remember to keep them educated. And I'm sure you know what I mean. When you're dealing with objections, I want to make sure there's only 3 things that could happen, okay, potentially, when you're trying to overcome an objection, okay? Always remember, what does an objection mean, first of all? An objection is not a no. I want to get that right out of your head. I got a friend in the business. I want to think it over. The price is too high. I'm not willing to pay that much. Whatever it is, doesn't matter what the objection is. I don't want to pay that commission. Doesn't matter. The point that I want to make sure you understand when you hear an objection, it is not a no. It is they're telling you, you haven't convinced me yet. I need more information. You see, that's what they're telling you. You haven't convinced me yet. I need more information. So that means you got to try harder. It means you got to work harder. It means you got to give them more information because they're not convinced. Okay. So when you're overcoming an objection, I have a friend in the business, hypothetically. Okay. Remember, one of three things is going to happen. You overcome the objection and they sign. Okay. You handle the objection and you've closed them. They sign the listing with you in the case of I have a friend in the business kind of thing. Okay. We'll come up with, we have scripts here for you as well. Now, the second thing that could happen is they come back with the same objection, but they change the phrasing slightly. So you try to deal with the objection. They're still not convinced. And they say, well, we bought it from them 5 years ago. Okay. So now you try to deal with this, the fact that they've bought it from them 5 years ago. Okay. So now, again, friend in the business. And the more times, by the way, they keep coming back with the same objection, the more real that objection is. It becomes a valid objection. I really need to deal with this because it's a valid one. Okay. Now, the third thing that could happen, okay, is that they abandon that objection. We don't want to be pushed. We want to think about it. So now it's no longer a friend in the business. Now it's I don't want to be pushed. I want to think about it. The point that I'm making here is only three things is ever going to happen when you deal with an objection. You overcome it. They repeat the same objection, only they change the phrasing, or they abandon that objection and they come up with another one. But somebody's going to give up tonight on this appointment. Is it going to be the real estate agent or is it going to be the seller? Now, I'm talking about a seller who really does want to sell his home, not somebody who's just you're doing the evaluation for because they want to know what their home is worth. They really don't have any desire to sell right now. But if this is an appointment where they do want and have to sell, then here's what I want to make sure that you understand. Somebody's going to give up, and it's usually the real estate agent who gives up and walks away without the listing because the client has said, well, we really want to think about it. And now, why is it that the real estate agent gives up? They give up basically for one reason, because they're stumped. They don't know what else. I've tried this. I've tried this. I've tried this. What now? I don't know what else to say. They run out of things to say. Here's what I want you to remember. You never give up. Okay. Every time I don't know how to deal with it. I've said everything I can say. I'm stumped. I've tried everything I can think of. And they come back with the same objection for the fourth time or fifth time, doesn't matter, the friend kind of thing. I want you to just look at them in the eye. I don't know what else to say. I want you to just look them in the eye and say, Mr. Seller, Mr. or Mrs. Seller, I know I can sell this house. I know I can get you the best price possible. Take your pen, put it down in front of the listing contract. Make sure that listing contract is on the table the whole time you're on that listing appointment, just like the offer is on that table. Make sure that listing contract is on that table. And all I need is your permission. I know I can sell this house. I know I can get you the best price possible. All I need is your permission. Would you give me a chance? And shut up. So whenever you're stumped, I want you to look them in the eye and ask for the listing in the case of the listing. Ask for a signature when it's an offer. You don't always have to deal with the objection. Sometimes you just go in here and out there and shake your head in a yes direction. And you don't have to. You've said everything there is to say. Okay. Sometimes people just need to talk about it. They need to keep saying no to you. Remember, they have to deny you again and again and again and again. And then they feel like I know I'm making the right decision if you follow what I'm saying. Sometimes that's all it is. They just need to deny themselves. therefore deny you. And now with your persistence, your professionalism, your concern, and all of that, and you're not giving up, and you're being very positive, eventually you will get that listing. Don't give up is all I can say to you. Remember what an objection is. It's, you haven't convinced me yet. Tell me more. That's what they're saying to you. I just gave you this page. Sorry, my little camera again. I may have to just turn this off. Okay, so that's what I was just saying here, what an objection means. So I used to always like to, when I was overcoming objections, remember, you do not want to get into a debate with them. You want to be asking questions. So I used to always like to deal with what I call a statement question technique. And so no matter what they said, you know, I want to think about it. You know, Mr. Seller, you know, always pause, remember, always pause. On the case of the listing, if this is the first objection on the listing, and they say, I have a friend in the business example, okay, because you hear that often. You pause, you look them in the eye. If I could help you overcome your concern with your friend in real estate, is there any other reason other than your friend that you would not be willing to list with me? I'm going to eliminate all other objections. Okay. Is there anything else? Is it just your friend? Is there anything else? And that's why I just said what I just said there. I understand. I have good friends of my own. That's the statement. I understand. I have good friends of my own. If I can help you overcome your concern with your friend, is there any other reason why you would not be willing to list with me tonight? Question. Okay, so there's an example of what I mean by a statement question technique. The statement, I'm glad you brought that up. That's a very good point. I understand. I can see why you would think that way. Okay, you're agreeing with them. You're not disagreeing with them. You're understanding of their situation and their point of view. Okay, the question, and then shut up and wait for a response, is what if? Would you consider? Suppose that. Would you be able to? Would you agree? Is there any way? You know, have you thought of? You know. So whatever you have to do, you want to tie it down with a question, and then you want to be silent and you want to wait for a response. So that's what we mean by using a statement question technique. So here are some objections and the script. Okay, I promised the listing to the agent I bought the house from. Mr. Seller, I respect loyalty. Have you ever had a friend say after you bought something or had to do something, oh, hey, when you need help, I can do it? Have you ever had a friend say that to you? Then later find out that had you gotten a second opinion first, it would have been a much better decision. This could be one of those times, Mr. Seller. In your best interest, let me give you a second opinion before you make that final decision. Okay? The second opinion close, as we call it. All of these, by the way, all of these presentations are in the Resource Center. You can watch again and again, and you can download if I'm not mistaken. I think you can anyways. Will you cut your commission? Oh, don't we love that one? How many love that one? Cut the commission. Mr. Seller, when I list your home, I have to invest all my money up front. I have to work nights, work weekends to sell your home. I have to do all the marketing, all the advertising that goes along with it, and will only get a return if I am successful at selling your home. You see, Mr. Seller, the only person taking a risk in this relationship is me. That sort of risk requires a reasonable return. Wouldn't you agree? Okay. So will you cut your commission? That's one way. There's a couple of different ways that we're going to talk about in here. The other thing I always like to say to real estate agent when the commission situation comes up, it depends on when the commission thing comes up. If you're on the phone and you're trying to get an appointment with them, and they say, well, what's your commission? Never tell them what your commission is. Is it commission negotiable? Mr. Seller, by law, yes, commission is negotiable. That was my answer. By law, yes, commission is negotiable. And it is. Okay, there is no set fee, as we all know. Would you cut your commission? I'm on the phone with them. Is commission going to be the deciding factor on who you choose to list with, Mr. Seller? Yes, he says to you. Fine. When we sit down and when we meet and I do show you what I can do to get your home sold for the best price possible, I will make sure commission is a discussion that we have. When is good for you? Saturday afternoon or during the week in an evening? What suits you better? Okay, so you're going to close for the appointment. Do not talk commission. Do not say, yes, I'm going to reduce my commission. Don't. That's not the time. The time to deal with commission is not now on a phone. That's for sure. Remember what the phone is to get an appointment. So that's one approach. The other agent yesterday said they would cut their commission. Okay, Mr. Seller, have you thought about if the other agent is that quick in giving away his own money, how quick do you think he will be to give up your money? You see, Mr. Seller, when you hire me tonight, you are not just hiring a marketing and internet expert, but you are also hiring a negotiator. So let me ask you a question. Are you telling me that you are looking to hire a discount negotiator? And then be quiet, because that's what they're doing. Okay, if the other agent says, okay, I'll take it for 4% or I'll take it for 3.5%, that's what they're doing. They're hiring a discount negotiator. That's exactly what they're doing. Is that what they want? Because we know what's going to happen. An offer comes in from a buyer and they're just going to discount the price because they don't know how to overcome objections. They don't understand the value of working. So they're going to take the path of least resistance. And you and I as real estate people know that cutting commission, you know what it means to me as a professional negotiator, as a professional realtor, a person who cuts commission all the time. Have I ever cut commission? Yes, I have, and I'll explain when. But a person who cuts commission all the time is somebody who's never learned how to overcome objections, who's never learned to properly prove the value of their services. And the only thing they have to offer, because they've never created a proper presentation, they don't know how to deliver a proper presentation. Therefore, the only thing they can do is cut their commission. Now, have I ever cut commission? Absolutely, I've cut commission many times in my life, but I have never cut commission to get a listing. When I cut commission, of course, is when an offer comes in. I'm the listing agent now. We've gone back and forth, and there's a few thousand difference now. We've whittled it down to a couple $1,000 hypothetically. Now I might call the other agent, the buyer's agent, and say, we might be in a situation where we might have to deal with commission. I do this not in front of a seller. I call the other agent. I get their opinion. Would you be willing? Would you cooperate? If we had to cut the commission, I'm willing to give a little. Are you willing to give a little? Negotiate that, not in front of a client, but on the phone before you go back for the third time or second time or fourth time, and now deal with the commission. That is when I've cut commission. I have never cut commission to get a listing, and I wouldn't cut commission. It's not the time. Right now, Mr. Seller, is not the time to deal with commission. Right now is the time to get you the best price possible. Now's the time to deal with marketing. Now's the time we need to look at all the money that we're going to invest in getting the property sold, because it's going to take money to do that, and it's my money it's going to take to do that. Because one thing we know for sure, and I tell people that there was a time, Mr. Seller, when it came to spending money on the marketing of a property, the broker paid for everything. The broker paid for advertising, the signs, the business cards, the feature sheets. They paid for everything. Okay. Today, the real estate agent pays for everything. It's not the brokerage business that pays for everything. You've got people out there in the real estate business that can't afford to market your property because they don't have the funds to do it. or they're not willing to invest any money. Mr. Seller, I have a marketing account. I have the funds. I can afford to market your property. And the minute you hire me, I'm going to hire my experts. I'm going to start investing money in the sale of this property. You see, that's the kind of thing that you got to deal, and the confidence you got to show when you're in front of them dealing with the commission situation, what you are going to do, okay? I think I am going to sell it myself to save the commission. Statistically, we know that over 70% of people looking to buy a home right now, Mr. Seller, have what we call frozen equity. Even if we made an offer on a home, they could not close on it until their home is sold first. 10%, so we know that 70% couldn't make an offer or would have to make an offer conditional on the sale of their home because their equity is frozen. It's tied up in their house. 10% are searching in the wrong price range. They're not even qualified to buy your home. Okay, so that's another 10%. 16% are just out shopping for decorating ideas and are not even interested in buying a house. So one cannot be too careful when we invite them into our home. 4% are what we call ready, willing, and able to buy. The problem is figuring out who the right 4% are. You see, Mr. Seller, we do not take any buyer out and show them houses until we have put them through a full screening process and have pre-qualified them, know they can afford to buy your house as potential buyers. Can you see how finding the right buyer is a very careful selection process? So what you're going to do now is, if you see this, is let them realize how much is at stake. Another one that I like, I'm going to sell it myself because I can save the commission, is when I would walk into a for sale by owner. I used to always ask them, may I ask you, Mr. Seller, I'm sure there's a good reason why you've decided to do this on your own and not put it in the hands of a hardworking real estate agent. Why have you decided to do this on your own? And they're going to tell you, well, my wife's a graphic designer. Take a look at this feature sheet, and I do my own open houses and I advertise. I get lots of buyers through, I do my own showings. What do I need you for? Why should I pay all this money? I can do it myself. I've been in sales all my life. I sell cars, whatever. I'm shaking my head yes as he's saying that, and he said, you're right. Mr. Seller, you already know that real estate agents, you've done such a good job here. I can see how much skill you have. You already know that real estate agents don't get paid for showing houses. We don't get paid for advertising. We don't get paid for doing open houses. We don't get paid for marketing this property at all. Mr. Seller, the only time we get paid is when we bring an offer that's acceptable to you and it closes successfully. That's the only time we get paid. And we're typically the last ones to get paid, Mr. Seller, by the way. So my point is this. You've been so careful and so knowledgeable about everything, but there might be something that you've overlooked. You've had a lot of buyers come through, you said, on their own, as private buyers. We in real estate call it the 30-minute law when it comes to getting an offer from buyers. Do you know what I mean by the 30-minute law? Now, I've been in front of rooms of hundreds of real estate people, and I've asked this question or made this point, the 30-minute law, and nobody can come up with, I don't know what you mean. What law are you talking about? I don't know about any law. You see, it's just how I phrased it. You do know what I'm talking about when I explain it to you. And they look and they say, I don't know about any 30-minute law. What are you talking about? And I say, well, Mr. Seller, let me share with you. You see, if it was listed with me, 30 minutes after we walk out the door of this home, that's when people are talking themselves out of it. That's when they're saying, maybe I need a bigger backyard. Maybe I would like an extra bathroom. Maybe the closet space isn't big enough, And when you've got this house on the market yourself, you see they're walking out the door. All of these objections are in their mind. All of these reasons why they think they shouldn't buy it. Mr. Seller, if this is the right house and the right buyer, I can have an offer ready, signed, and able to be presented to you within 30 minutes from the time I've shown your house. That's how fast I can get an offer, if it's the right house with the right client. That's what we call the 30-minute law. You see, 30 minutes after we walk out the door together, that's when you're paying me to go to work with you. Right now, doing it on your own, they're walking out the door by themselves and nobody's working for you. So that's a really, really, really good one also to help you overcome. The forever for sale by owner. Mr. Seller, when you are trying to sell your own home on your own, here is what you are competing against. Every sales agent is typically working with at least 10 pre-qualified buyers at any given time. So in a market with about 1,000 agents, each one with about 10 prospects, that means there are 10,000 buyers in a buyer pool right now. So when you are doing this on your own, typically for sale by owners who have prospects are not even seeing these 10,000 potential buyers. Okay, so can you see how listing with me is not only going to get my clients excited, but all these other agents who are working with at least 5 to 10 potential qualified buyers right now. You see, when you're doing it on your own, you're not able to capture those. So you're missing. And selling is exposure. The more people get to see your property, the more buyers get to see your property, the better your chances are of getting the best price possible. Other agents have given me a higher price than you. Mr. Seller, the easiest way for a realtor to get you to list with them is to tell you what they think you want to hear. Whereas I, on the other hand, believe it is important to only tell you the truth. Did you know that almost 50% right now of homes on the market do not actually sell? Were you aware of that? My comparable solds show the price that I have indicated, where there are two places that I can list your home. One is where it just sits on the market, and two is where it sells. And that was the two price strategy that I talked to you about. So which is your choice? So having it sit on the market at a high price, or getting it listed at market value and getting multiple offers. That's the two price strategy that I went with you. I have a friend in the business, Mr. Seller. I know how important friendship is. This is one that I use all the time. Have you read the book called Swimming with the Sharks Without Getting Eaten Alive? It's a top business book written by Harvey Mackay. And he's one of the top business consultants in the world. Have you ever read that book? Doesn't matter what they say. There's a passage in this book. I read this book, and I've never forgotten. It has saved me from making so many business mistakes in my lifetime. And here's what the passage says. Make your business decisions with your heart, and all you will end up with is heart disease. Clearly, listing with a friend, Mr. Seller, is a heartfelt decision. I understand that. My question is, if you were to list with your friend and you were not happy with the service they were providing you, how easy would it be for you to fire them? Now, Mr. Seller, if it was me you listed with and you weren't happy, you see my point? It would be no problem for you to pick up the phone and call me and tell me that you don't want to list any longer with me or whatever. So you see my point there. Swimming with the sharks without getting eaten alive. Make your decisions with your heart, and you'll end up with heart disease. Number 8, I want to find a house before I put mine on the market. I understand your concern about your new home. We could go out and be looking right away, and I'm sure I would be able to find you a home that you loved. The problem comes when making an offer on this new home, as you know. I would insist on a contingency or a condition, whichever way you want to phrase it, on the sale of your own home clause before we to be put into the offer. This could greatly hurt your negotiating price, and the seller would have to be very concerned about accepting this clause because he's typically taking his house off the market. The safest way for you that offers you the best negotiating strategy is to list your home with me, get it sold with a 60, 90, even 120-day closing, giving you lots of time for you to find the home that you want. There are many new listings that come out every single day. Finding you a new home would not be difficult. In all my years of being in real estate, nobody that I've ever sold their home ended up not being able to find a house. So I'm sure, Mr. Seller, we can make that happen for you quite easily. I want to think it over, Mr. Seller. I understand, Mr. Seller, we've talked about and covered a lot of things tonight. Wouldn't you agree? Is there anything we talked about that you were still not clear on? From what you share with me, you shared with me, you really want to sell your home now, right? I mean, you really want to get out of here now. That's what you've talked to me about. Are you satisfied that I am the best agent to get this home sold for you? Yes or no? Do you think our company is the right company? Wait for a response. Yes or no? Is it the price that concerns you? So you see now, they say, well, we were kind of hoping we want a little more. If they say, no, we're happy with the price, then can you help me out? What is it exactly that makes you want to think about it? Help me out. So that's how I dealt with, I want to think it over. If you sell my house quickly, will you cut your commission? Let me make sure I understand you correctly. The longer it takes me to sell your home, the more you are willing to pay me. But the quicker I sell your home, the less you are willing to pay me. So what you are really telling me is if I do a really bad job and take a long time to sell your home, you'll pay me more. But if I do a really great job and sell your home quickly, you want to penalize me. That really doesn't make sense. From my perspective, you see, we operate from a performance-based system, Mr. Seller. Many people want to view us based on an hourly rate business. That is not the way real estate works. We are based only on a performance-based result. The sooner I sell your home, the better job I have done. In fact, some would say that you would want to pay me a bonus for selling it quickly. Let's say a doctor told you that they could do the surgery in 30 minutes, or it could be done in 30 days. Clearly, you would want to get it over with quickly. Real estate operates much the same way. Wouldn't you agree? So, I think this is my last one. I want to price it higher. We can always come down. This is exactly what I just went through, the two-price strategy. We don't need to go through this again because I just did that with you. I think this is the last slide, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, that's part of the same thing. Yes, that's it. So I hope I've helped in your whole issue with dealing with objections. Any questions? I always have such smart people. No questions. Okay. Thank you all very, very, very much. Thank you, Mr. DJ. I'm glad you found that awesome. I appreciate all your little compliments. Believe me, I haven't eaten. I'm starving to death. You guys have yourself a wonderful week, and I will see you next week. And my dog is talking to me right now. Have a great week, everybody. Thank you, Katrina.